Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss mobility technologies in the federal government. With me today on the show are Frank Konieczny, the Chief Technology Officer at the U.S. Air Force, Dr. Jennifer Carter, the Component Acquisition Executive at DISA, Adina Pantella, the TASBO Program Manager, CBP Office of Information and Technology, Tommy Roland Jr., the Program Manager, CBP Office of Field Operations, Chris O'Connell, the VP of Federal Sales at Appian Corporation, Oliver Friedrichs, the Senior Vice President for Cloud Technology Group at Sourcefire, and David Smith, the Chief Technology Officer, Public Sector at Citrix. Let's get into the program and talk a little bit about this subject. Mobility is a hot topic. Everyone's talking about the mobile workforce and where we're all going. Let's start with Frank over at the Air Force. Frank, tell us a little bit about your strategy at the Air Force for using mobility.
Well, you're right. Mobility is a hot topic. It's been a hot topic for a while, especially in DoD. DoD has come out with a strategy document, and we're basically following the strategy document as part of the Air Force. And the strategy says develop communications and infrastructure to support, go out and do policies, and then figure out what devices. And so from the Air Force, we have to look at it from two viewpoints, a tactical viewpoint as well as, if you like, a non-tactical viewpoint. Mm-hmm. And most people think of it just as the business side, you know, having your own cell phone or whatever. But this is different in the tactical environment. This is having the ability to do things correctly and to get information right away.
Right. Yeah, it's important. We live in that time where decision making is getting squashed down to, you know, it's like a new dimension in time where time equals zero for decision making. Tommy Roland, it's refreshing to have a field person here because I see, you know, when you talk mobility, you think of more and more folks out there in the field. What are some of the strategies for mobility use in Customs and Border Protection?
Well, CBP is a complex organization, Jim, with a very complex
Absolutely.
mission to protect the homeland, but we also have to facilitate legitimate trade and travel. We have a global presence. We're around the world.
Right.
We've got personnel at Immigration Advisory Program airports all around the world, at foreign airports, including Amsterdam, Frankfurt, London, Madrid, Paris. We have personnel at 57 Container Security Initiative ports around the world. We have CBP officers at over 300 ports of entry. We have Border Patrol agents in between the ports of entry. We have air and marine agents in the air and on the water. What does this mean? It means that complexity is a part of our strategy. Right. Very simple. One size doesn't fit all.
Yeah. So you've got to be able to communicate with all these folks.
Yes, sir. But what's going to work for an officer at an IAP airport in London is not going to necessarily work for the Border Patrol agent in the middle of the West Texas desert.
Yeah, so it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Got to have multiple different tools to be able to access the information.
Yeah, great. You know, I take credit for inventing wireless, by the way. I'm really glad I did, hearing all these uses that we have for it now. But anyway, we'll get back. We'll talk about some of the benefits you see coming out of here shortly. Oliver Friedrichs over at Sourcefire. How is a company like Sourcefire positioning to help solve some of these problems, to help address these strategies that the government agencies have around mobility?
Well, as a leader in the cybersecurity space, we've been protecting computer networks, certainly for government agencies, for well over 10 years now.
Right.
With the evolution of mobile devices and the growth of mobile device threats now in the last year alone, we've expanded both our network technologies and our advanced malware protection solutions to now protect both employee-owned mobile devices as well as company-provisioned and government-provisioned mobile devices on the endpoint from malware threats. Right. So it's a combination of both network protection, detecting devices, and finding devices that may not be provisioned by the enterprise, as well as protecting the device itself from advanced malware that we're seeing a big growth in over the last year alone.
You have to bring your own device in the holistic approach to covering security, and that full gambit's a real challenge. And we're going to drill down on that and talk security on the subject, hopefully in a few minutes. Dr. Jennifer Carter over at DISA, I guess when we think, I always think of DISA as being out in the forefront in a lot of things. And tell us a little bit about some of the strategies for mobility use at DISA.
Yes, so in addition to users of the mobility technology, we also provide an infrastructure and a common framework for leveraging across DoD. So in addition to sort of the business aspects that was mentioned, it's very important that we provide that common infrastructure and address some of the DoD-wide challenges of management of the mobile devices, management of applications, so that we can have opportunities to infuse that technology rapidly for tactical operations as well across DoD.
Yeah, I tell you, it's going to be exciting, and there's a lot of talk about the public safety broadband network and the auctioning of the D-block spectrum. And when some of this stuff happens, I think, we think we've seen all kinds of technological jumps in the past with the internet, but I think when some of the mobility things get out there and the speed gets out there, we're going to see things that we can't even imagine today. Chris O'Connell over at Appian, how is a company like Appian playing and supporting mobility use in government?
Well, Appian has a long history with the federal government, supporting over 35 agencies. We see a broad range of needs and the complexities that Tommy mentioned across the agencies. And so Appian, as a business process management company, we are aiming for greater efficiencies in enabling agencies to perform their mission more effectively, to make better decisions. We view a key part of that is to deploy on mobile devices.
Right.
And putting that in the hands not only of the customers, but also the agencies behind the firewall, and allowing an interaction between the two so that agencies can serve their constituencies better.
Right, terrific, fantastic. David Smith, Citrix, how is Citrix playing in this space? How are you positioning to support these mobility uses in government?
So thanks for having us this afternoon.
Sure.
At Citrix, our vision is a world where anyone can work from anywhere. And so powering mobile work styles is really what Citrix is all about. And that has to deal with a lot of different things, whether it's collaboration of users, access to data, or even access to critical apps and desktop infrastructure. So what we are providing government customers is the ability to deliver IT as a service and look at the endpoint as an access device and not have to necessarily depend on which specific endpoint they're going to have to deliver to. Because I think, if we go down to the local, Best Buy or other mobile electronics store, what you see in the store today and what you see in the store 3 or 4 weeks from now may be totally different.
Absolutely.
And so this is a constantly changing space, and so having to depend specifically on a device becomes even more of a challenge.
Right. Yeah, I always know what the latest devices that you can get because we have a family plan and my kids are all on it. And they monitor when they're allowed to get the free upgrade and they fight over who gets the next upgrade. So, but I always get to see the latest technology because one of them has it. But anyway, let's talk about some of the benefits. I mean, this is all the mobility sounds great, but what do we see the real key benefits to government, the American people? What's this going to be doing for us? Let's start with Tommy Roland this time over at CBP. What do you see, Tommy, some of the big benefits coming out of going to mobility?
Delivering data to our user where they need it provides two key benefits: improved enforcement results and improved efficiencies. Since the deployment of our mobile border solution, where we integrate a smartphone application with a scanning peripheral that attaches to the smartphone, our officers and Border Patrol agents have effected over 600 seizures and arrests using the tool. The scanning peripheral can read the machine-readable zone on a travel document, magnetic stripes,
Right.
and we just deployed an upgrade where we can read fingerprints on a handheld device now.
Wow, neat.
For example, at a Border Patrol checkpoint in Sarita, Texas, Border Patrol agents boarded a bus. The agents queried a woman using the mobile application. The woman was the subject of an enforcement hit for child smuggling. They took the woman, her traveling companion, 3 children off the bus.
Wow.
Turns out that the children had been smuggled into the United States, and the women were also carrying 6 pounds of cocaine.
Wow.
Our mobile cargo solution provides improved efficiencies not only for CBP, but for our trade partners as well. Before mobile, CBP agriculture specialists would target arriving cargo and put the information on paper hold sheets. The ag specialist would then go to the container yard,
Right.
do the examination, mark down their results on the hold sheet, and then go to container 2, and then container 3, container 4, so on and so forth. After the examinations, they would go back to the office and put in their exam results. Now, the agriculture specialist accesses the information on a tablet computer, and they put the exam findings in real time into the tablet. What that does is the efficiencies for us
Sure,
are obvious.
sure.
We don't have to drive back to the office.
Right.
We don't have to download the information. But what's not so obvious is the efficiency to our trade partners. At Port Everglades in Florida, shipments of bananas are examined in the morning. Shipments examined before 11 a.m. usually missed the noon train going to Jacksonville because the officers had to go back to
Right.
the office and put the information in.
Right.
Now shipments are released in real time, and the container examined before 11 makes the noon train. What does it mean? An increase in market value.
Right.
Because that one reefer containers, one refrigerated container of bananas
Right.
with 1,000 boxes, Dole, Chiquita, the
Sure.
importers, they say that's an increased market value of $50 a box.
Cool.
That's 50 grand.
Absolutely. I mean, it means I don't have to buy those browned out bananas when they get to the supermarket because it took them too long to get there.
Absolutely. I don't even buy green bananas anymore. Mobile solutions aren't just used to lock up bad guys. We see mobile solutions as a game changer for all of CBP operations, having a positive impact on our trade partners as well as a negative impact on the bad guys.
Terrific. That's what we like. Something for the good guys and a way to get the bad guys. Dr. Carter, Jennifer Carter over at DISA, what do you see as some of the key benefits that DISA will see as going to mobility programs?
Well, certainly increased productivity and collaboration and more timely responses as people have information access right at their fingertips where they are. So you'll see a seamless work environment between the office and deployments and the field, allowing people to be able to do their business better across the board. But in addition to that perspective, also again in the tactical environment, improved capabilities, applications that people need in the tactical environment, and both supporting day-to-day operations and the needs of the warfighter. And if you think of the user carrying their device, again, from the office into the field, and then providing capabilities through a set of applications that can be tailored for the work that they do in the field, that's going to become very important for users. And I believe there's a lot of applications that we haven't even yet defined where we can use the mobile technology in innovative ways that are going to provide benefits we have yet to realize. And then in addition, for the DoD-wide perspective, providing a common infrastructure will help enable efficiencies, rapid delivery of mobile technologies because the infrastructure, the device management, and the application management is there, and then also improved network and application performance, and then, of course, the security aspect, consistent security across DoD.
Yeah, we're going to drill down on security. I think that's a big issue for everybody here, and so we're going to get to that here in a few minutes. Frank, over at U.S. Air Force, what do you see as some of the biggest benefits that will accrue to Air Force by using mobile programs?
Well, Tommy and Jennifer basically talked about, the basic one, getting
Right.
the right information to the right person at the right time. That's always true. But in the Air Force, we have, missions that, besides tactical, there's also rescue missions.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have a hurricane or an earthquake, it's important to be able to see what's going on, to see the routes of exit that are going on and try to manage that. And so we support a lot of those efforts as well, besides the tactical warrior out there.
Right.
There's another thing, too, that, our airmen coming in are used to having devices. We want to make sure that we have a good, positive, environment
Sure,
for them to come
absolutely.
into. And
Absolutely.
so it's important to say, we want to attract people that are well-suited and well-qualified for the Air Force. And a lot of this is because we want to make sure the technology is there for them. And they're used to this technology. They're used to this at home.
Right.
And in fact, I read a survey the other day that most people in the industry believe that they're entitled to bring their phone into the office.
Yeah.
That's because they're so used to it.
Yeah.
And so we want an environment for new airmen to come in to say, yes, this is a new modern environment, and we can get the best people for the best jobs that we have.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. When our kids enter the workplace, they're going to have totally different expectations about using the devices as compared to when we entered the workplace. Tommy, a comment on that?
Yeah, what Frank said is right on target. We're seeing a generation of users, just like he's seeing the young airmen. We're seeing these young officers. When we do training and deployment, what we do is we hold up the different devices that they're carrying.
Right.
And they're carrying Droids, they're carrying Blackberries, they're carrying iPhones. And we know what kind of training session we're going to have.
Right.
And what we have to remember is that these kids today, they grew up with computers in the house.
Absolutely.
They're not old guys like us.
That's right. You're exactly right. It's a big issue, the expectations of the next generation workforce. David Smith, what do you see as some of the benefits coming out from movement towards mobile platforms and more use of mobility to meet government needs and needs of the American people?
So I think to follow on the conversation we're just having, right, user consistency is key. To be able to provide a way that they get easy access to information, but do so in a way that's familiar, lowers the training barrier for the end user. You don't have to go through all the different steps to teach them complex systems. When I think about the way we deliver technology today versus the way it was delivered 15 years ago, everything came with, a manual that was 1.5 inches thick, right? The last time, I can't remember the last time I bought a piece of technology that came with a manual at all. Right. Most of the stuff, you can go online and maybe read something, but you don't need it. So I think easier access to information is key. And then I think from a IT service delivery standpoint, in the mobility space, we've learned a lot from the consumer side, right? So we need to provide an environment where users can leverage something like an app store and go get applications as they need them, rather than to have to predict what the end user is going to want and need to do.
Yeah, I think you're right too, and I think there's part of the digital strategy administration is to have start creating apps for mobile apps for agencies. So it's a hot topic. Oliver, Sourcefire, what do you see as some of the key benefits that will accrue coming out of this?
Well, I think when we look at mobility, there's another trend that's tied very closely to it, which is the cloud, right? I think the cloud combined with mobile is providing a remote work environment that we've never seen before. We see well over 5 billion mobile devices today, and about 1 billion of those are smartphones, right? Devices that actually have more computing power than my PC had 5 to 10 years ago, which provides you with a tremendous amount of capability on your mobile device to do everything that you've done traditionally on your PC, but also introduces the same threat environment that we traditionally saw in the PC world as well, which is also very different, because mobile platforms and mobile devices actually introduce, in some cases, more security risks because of the data that is stored and accessed on a mobile device than we traditionally saw in the PC world. So certainly a huge benefit from a productivity standpoint, but also something we need to think about seriously from a security standpoint as well.
Right. Good. Yeah, I'm anxious to get to that security issue, as we will, I promise. Chris O'Connell, Appian, what do you see as some of the key benefits that are going to come out of this program?
Well, I think you've heard a number of them across both collaboration, the efficiencies, and training, and just a couple good example use cases. VA for Vets is a program for integration of soldiers back into the workforce. Sure. We were at a recruiting event that we were supporting with an application that was built across mobile technology, and we handed out iPads to 30 people who had never used the app before, and they were able to go and register and route employees and get them into the processes of the case management system that would allow them to be filtered across many different areas within the VA. Yeah. It's an amazing story. And then out of GSA, you see stories for efficiencies in the mobile workforce, where you have Public Building Service that is planning to use mobile technology across all federal buildings around the country to manage both leasing and additional processes like assessments and kicking off purchase requests for items that are required across buildings. So there's such a wide range, but you can deploy them so quickly, put them in the hands of people, and then use that social interface that is so readily available to bring in the collaboration that will be required to interact and make those decisions quickly and most effectively.
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, I mean, I just love doing this show and hearing these stories that you don't hear about, things that are going on, the feel-good kind of things you're talking about, the advantages to law enforcement and border protection that Tommy was talking about. You don't hear about these things, so it's a joy to do the show and hear these things. We need to talk about some of the challenges and drill down on that security question here. But before we do that, we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Frank Konieczny from the Air Force, Dr. Jennifer Carter from DISA, Adina Pantella from CBP, Tommy Roland from CBP, Chris O'Connell from Appian, Oliver Friedrichs from Sourcefire, and David Smith from Citrix. We're talking mobility. We talked about benefits. We talked about some strategies. Let's talk about some of the challenges. And let's first start with that security challenge. It's come up already several times in the conversation. And I think everyone knows when we go to the mobile platforms and we've got all these different devices out there, it changes that traditional security equation that we've known where we're protecting the mainframes and the servers and so forth and the networks. Now we've got devices everywhere, so it creates some new challenges. So, it's such a key issue with mobility. How are you incorporating security into your plans? Let's start with Adina Pantella over at CBP at the TASPO office. That's the Targeting and Analysis Systems office. Can you talk a little bit about how you're incorporating security into your mobile planning?
Absolutely. Security will always be very important to our organization because we deal with personal data and trade-sensitive data in order to identify and mitigate risk associated with arriving and departing passengers and cargo. With our initial mobile solutions, we leverage the existing CBP Wi-Fi and telecom infrastructures in order to manage the deployment of these mobile applications as well as updates and communication. We leverage secure network access via strong encryption mechanisms, even over commercial cell towers. And we also employ secure device enrollment, which helps us ensure that when connected to the CBP network, the device is recognized as a trusted device. We also employ least privilege access security model, which means that most of the functions on the phone are actually locked down in order to promote security.
Okay.
We don't store any data on the devices themselves. And in case that's lost, that's an added layer
you're not losing the
of
data.
security. Yes. And we can remotely wipe devices. And if someone tries to enter the incorrect password on the phone, after so many tries, the device will be automatically wiped.
Oh, cool.
So that's another way that we can ensure security. In addition to that, we have our cargo application that uses the BlackBerry phone, also the BlackBerry Playbook. And the tablet is connected to the phone via a secure Bluetooth connection.
Okay.
And lastly, at the application level, we do a lot of auditing of the functions that are performed by the user in the system.
Okay.
As well as monitoring of all of the queries that are being executed by the user in the system. So that helps not only prevent misuse, but promote security.
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you, the topic, and one thing is I think industry understands this topic is so critical, and there's all kinds of research going on that's just going to continually be targeted at improving the security on these devices and so forth. And obviously CBP is well out in front in incorporating what's available today, and as things develop, I'm sure there'll be opportunities to let's go over to the Air Force. Frank, what is how are you incorporating the security question into your planning and your strategy for mobile devices?
Okay, security is a big issue and always has been. But there's lots of ways looking at security. We talk about we looked at various devices and have secure enclaves in those devices so that we can have, if you like, dual persona, a commercial side as well as a business side.
Right.
So it's a multi-use device.
Right.
However, we've done various pilots with those already, and we've had some success and some not successful pilots, but we're learning by those pilots. We also have incorporated ABAC controls. So based on who you are and what you're doing, we're trying to get to the point where we can actually restrict applications.
Right.
And give you an application if you're supposed to be doing something now,
Right.
based on your role. The harder part has been the authentication piece. We use the CAT cards right now.
Right.
And it's very difficult to have a Bluetooth connection with a CAT card, especially if you're in the field.
Right.
If you're a tactical, that's nearly impossible.
Right.
And so we've been looking at various different authentication mechanisms for the mobile devices. And it may come out to be biometrics, it may come out to be a combination of various things. And, you know, that's obviously a concern as to what we actually come out with, because in the field you can't be playing with your CAT card.
Right. Yeah. And the small device, you're carrying the device, you're not going to carry the card and so forth. That's going to be an interesting challenge. But, you know, there are some neat things going on. I actually saw some phones where, you know, if you're using a business application, none of the serendipity or personal stuff will work, or if you're using the personal stuff, none of the business stuff will work, and there's firewalls in between them. So all that stuff's coming. But you're right, the authentication, and I've said this on many shows, if we can get authentication and the identity management down, so many things become so much easier to do once you positively identify and know who you're working with. Dr. Carter over at DISA, what do you see as, how are you incorporating that security issue into your planning and your strategies?
Right, so the security issue is multi-layered. And in addition to the authentication piece, there's the mobile device management and how we, and the layers of capability for being able to manage and monitor the devices themselves. There's the gateway to the network perspective and being able to make sure that we have security aspects there. There's the management of the security of the applications. And of course, we're looking for an integrated, in the long term, an integrated classified and unclassified infrastructure so that we can leverage efficiencies there. So we're looking at making sure it addresses the multiple levels of security classifications as well. So there's several things that we're doing to work that integrated security perspective. One, of course, is the security technical implementation guides and updating those for the community. And we work with the national security agencies, representative from the services, to be able to update those specifically to address the mobile application technologies. In addition to that, we're working to develop security requirements guides. That's taking a more proactive approach for being able to provide guidance, to be able to work the operating system in a device agnostic perspective so that we can partner better with industry to get ahead of where the issues are for being able to certify devices. Because the third part of that is making sure we have a rapid ability to be able to certify devices so that we're not always behind the technology curve. And that's going to be a key component. And we're working to update the certification and accreditation process to be able to support that as well.
Clearly, we can't have the CNA process take longer than the next generation of technology. And as we talked a little before, if you go to the cellular phone stores, there's like a new product on the market every couple months. So that certification and accreditation process gets to be interesting. Oliver Friedrichs, how about Sourcefire? How are you supporting the government and addressing some of the security issues around mobility?
So our focus is on the traditional concept of information superiority. One of the biggest challenges today is that there are so many mobile devices that employees bring into the enterprise or government that can't be tracked, that don't have software on them, and they're connecting to the wireless network or the physical network. So we've taken a multi-pronged approach. One is visibility on the network side, using visibility technologies to see devices as they get attached to the network that you wouldn't traditionally see.
So you know what you've got out there.
Exactly, looking at the protocols that are being used, the applications that are being run without actually having software on the endpoint. But those devices that can be managed where IT does have the ability to deploy endpoint software, we also have an agent-based technology and strongly believe that that provides a required footprint on the device itself in order to detect and remove threats that might appear on the device. So you can't solve the problem in just one place. You have to look at both the network and the device from a holistic viewpoint.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, you know, the trend these days is holistic security. Even with like cloud and stuff, people say, oh, cloud will bring out new security vulnerabilities and things like that. But on the other hand, it's an opportunity to step back and say, hey, let's look at all these Band-Aid approaches we've been using for the last 20 years. And maybe we can look at a holistic approach and get rid of a lot of that stuff that's in the middle there that maybe it's not necessary anymore. David Smith over at Citrix, I would imagine this is a high priority for you guys too. So how are you helping address some of these security concerns?
Absolutely, and actually to just follow on to your Band-Aid approach, right? I think what we've seen in infrastructures over the last 20 years, we're kind of changing paradigms where the exceptions, what used to be the exceptions, are now the actual norms. So where you were mobile, it was an exception versus now it's
true.
it's a reality most of the time. So, and we used to assume that somebody would be in an office, they would own a wired network, and all these exceptions for mobility and wireless networks and things are now just the new reality. And so we're building infrastructures that are more focused on that. Just a couple quick points on the security issue. I agree with Adina. Looking at data on the device and trying to avoid putting data on that device is really important. If you can deliver content and allow a user to interact with an application without actually moving data to that device, you significantly reduce the risk of that endpoint. But there are definitely, in mobile, there are definitely scenarios where you're going to walk around with a device and you're not going to be on a network, and therefore data will have to be on that device. And so as best as you can sandbox that device, make sure that that data can be pulled off if necessary. And then scenario-based access, to Frank's point. How can we make sure that if a user is on a specific network or whether they're on a trusted network or an untrusted network, can we determine what level of access they have, not only based on who they are, but where they are and how they're accessing, is an increasingly important security point and something that we can do depending on where we're delivering data from.
Yeah, I think you raised some really good points, and Adina did too, about trying to find ways to not move the data to the device. And I do think with proliferation of broadband, if we get the better speeds out there so that you can actually be reading the data on your machines in your office without physically moving the data to the device, it'll make a big difference in dealing with that security issue.
Absolutely.
Chris, over at Appian, how are you looking at that security question? Because I think, a lot of folks are reluctant to just, go full scale with mobility until they feel confident that that security issue is being addressed.
And that's a very important point, because if you want to deploy to the environment, if you want to gain the efficiencies that are going to be required, you have to be on top of it or you will not be deployed. And it is a constantly evolving game that we're struggling with, both from a device perspective, from an application perspective, and vulnerability perspective. So Appian is very much, like Adina mentioned, you're taking a look at multiple layers, the device management, the network, the application level. And Appian running on the SIPRnet and running on DISA's deck knows the complexities that are required from the application perspective. Over the past 2 years, as we've been mobile-enabled, we've been working with the actual device manufacturers, with working groups across the DoD and federal civilian agencies to help deliver the policies, identify those best practices, so that we're continuously assessing the security threats, the new pieces that are coming out. We also deploy across multiple platforms. So with Appian, you click a box, and we're actually deploying on iOS, on BlackBerry, and on Androids. And part of the reason why we do that is because no one quite knows what device our people are going to use,
Sure.
if it's bring your own device,
Sure.
or which one will win out in the end. And so what we want to do is take that decision apart away from the agencies and actually be prepared to support any of those platforms.
Right.
And Frank brings up another great point, especially with the DoD and some of the other agencies that are around, and there are still some without connectivity locations across the U.S. It brings different levels. So at DISA, we did a CAC-enabled sled on a STIG'd BlackBerry.
Right.
That will not work in some of the lockdown areas for the Air Force.
That's a point Tommy brought up earlier, too. There is no one-size-fits-all here.
There isn't. And so what we are constantly doing is working with our partners and agencies to help identify the policies and best practices that we've seen in the commercial space, but also the new use cases that are coming out because of the breadth and depth of business that's being performed by the federal government.
Yeah, terrific. Exciting stuff going on. Let's talk about some other challenges. We hit security, but it seems to me there are a few other challenges with mobility. I think, Chris, you just sort of brought one up. I like an iPhone, I like an Android, I like a BlackBerry. I don't want any of them. I want to do, on and on and on. Tommy, what are some of the challenges you see that you're facing every day, some of the issues you got to resolve in order to get where you want to go with all this stuff.
Implementing a mobility strategy, we don't see it as a one-time project. We see it as an investment. Investments require funding.
Money.
And in our current environment, funding is tough. Funding is tough. That's the tough news.
It's tough, and a continuing resolution, and a threat of sequestration, and
But
I understand that one.
But as we continue to see improvements in our enforcement efforts and our efficiencies, that funding's starting to come through.
Good.
We knew that we were on the right path when our Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Winkowski, said he believed that there would be a time in the future, and it's not that far out, that officers and Border Patrol agents, when they graduate from the academy, they're going to get their gun, they're going to get their handcuffs, and they're going to get their smartphone.
Cool.
So we knew that we're on the right path. One of the things that we've worked on with the challenges, though, is that our mobile solutions are web browser-based applications. So it addresses the security aspect from not putting, as Adina said, on the device. But we look to see with that web browser-based application, as Chris said, okay, by doing it that way, if the device is secure as far, the application is up in the cloud. So with that technology solution can safely access the CBP intranet, we're rock solid.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think we're going to see some developments along those very lines you're talking about here. And I think I see the day where, the cost issue can be addressed by if you use the wireless device, but it also becomes the docking station for your office computer and things like that. You'll be able to reduce the cost you're paying for, PCs at work and desktops and things like that, and the device itself becomes the docking station and becomes your one universal device. Let's talk, Frank Konieczny. What are some of the other challenges you face every day, Frank, in trying to roll your strategy out?
Well, as Tommy said, we have web-based applications for the mobile devices, but a lot of those, we always want agnostic, devices. The problem with that is that you can't sometimes use the capabilities that are organic to the device. And so a lot of people say, well, that's really great, but, you're not using what my iPad has. Right. I can't do slides, I can't do copies easily, I can't do any of this stuff. It just looks like my terminal at the office.
Right.
And so there has to be a balance between the two,
right,
between figuring out how we can bring in new devices quickly, however, keep the organic capabilities of those devices, and I'm sure the capabilities are going to change.
Right. Yeah, so the users are, I like this, but more. I want more, which is understandable. I want to hear from Dr. Carter and our industry guest on this subject too, but before we do that, we're going to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Frank Konieczny from Air Force, Dr. Jennifer Carter from DISA, Adina Pantella from CBP, Tommy Roland Jr. from CBP, Chris O'Connell from Appian, Oliver Friedrichs from Sourcefire, and David Smith from Citrix. We're talking mobility, we've talked about security, and now we're talking a little bit about challenges other than that security issue. And we've heard from a couple of our government guests. Let's hear from Dr. Carter at DISA. What are some of the challenges you face every day trying to get your mobile strategy out?
Right, so in addition to the security aspects that we talked about, one of the key challenges is the management perspective, the management of the mobile devices and setting up that infrastructure, the management of the applications. So if you look at the broad range of requirements, not just for DISA, but because we service DoD-wide and setting up that infrastructure, they range anywhere from thin client to disconnected operations, broad range of applications. The application store will probably have a federated approach for multiple services and multiple classification levels. So there's a lot of challenge with setting up that management piece. In addition to setting up that management piece, we need to make sure that it is agile. And so from a government perspective, that's going to be a challenge of making sure, again, that we can keep pace with the changing technology and with the way that we enter things into that management environment. So that's one of the key challenges that we're working right now. And we've got a series of pilots that we're working with the services to work through some of those issues. And we are planning to set up that infrastructure that has a broad range of requirements that it meets, in addition to multiple devices, multiple carriers so that we can infuse a wide range of technology to address warfighter needs.
Yeah, terrific. Well said. That term agile comes up everywhere too. It seems like to be the hot topic these days. Agile everything, and as well as everything as a service and cloud and so forth and so forth. David Smith, what do you think? What are some of the challenges you see out there other than that security one?
So I think that an interesting point, right? So we look at mobile, and then it's often used in tandem with BYO, and I think that they're two very different things in some ways because, when you get into mobile device management, managing a mobile device is important, but I don't know as if it's a personal device if I want my agency managing my device.
Right.
So, how can I deliver to a user-owned device in a way that provides a kind of a secure way to deliver without kind of intruding on all the personal stuff that they have
Good
on that
point.
device?
Good point.
So we look at that as one of the challenges. I think the other thing that I've seen in some circumstances is that we look at platform before we look at the requirement. So sometimes these mobile solutions are a solution looking for a problem. And they've picked a platform. They know that they want to use an iPad or an Android-based device, but they're trying to figure out how to fit that square peg into the round hole.
Right.
And then the last thing is, in many of these cases, these are consumer devices, and they don't necessarily have built into them everything that we need. We were talking about
Right.
authentication before. There aren't smart card readers on a lot of these mobile devices, so we can't do CAC. So, we have third-party vendors building them in, but you still have to interact with the individual operating system. You have to worry about things like jailbroken devices. So, some of it's going to depend on industry to try to figure out some of these problems. But we may have to look at, purpose-built devices in some circumstances, especially when we
Right.
start getting into tactical spaces.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there's going to be a need for some special types of products as well as the general products. Chris O'Connell, how about at Appian? What do you see some of the additional challenges other than that security challenge we already talked about?
Well, I appreciate Tommy mentioning the elephant in the room when it comes to government, and yes, funding is shrinking.
Yeah.
And yes, we have to find ways of freeing up more of those dollars in order to provide the efficiencies that are required. And I think what's going to end up happening is we need to be smarter about how we're deploying our applications. We need to ensure that we're not building applications for application's sake,
Right.
and that we're doing it with a bigger picture in mind, so that we don't get into the same O&M problem that has kind of plagued the federal government and trying to keep up with what it's built
Right.
and keeping it up to date. So I think that is one of the challenges, and I think a great opportunity for deploying once across all platforms, bringing real mission-critical work to be performed on mobile devices so that you are seeing the efficiencies, the
Right.
collaboration that then will reduce your application footprint, that will allow you to reduce that O&M cost that can feed back into your innovation.
Yeah.
So you want to cut that O&M down in order to provide value to the future.
Yeah, I think
for
you're exactly right.
efficiencies.
I think it's going to all be about finding ways to reduce O&M costs for the next
Yeah.
several years
Yeah.
in these tight budget times. Oliver Friedrichs over at Sourcefire, what do you see as some of the other challenges, other than that security challenge? What are some of the other things that need to be accomplished or overcome to get where you want to go with your mobility
Well,
plans?
I think Frank hit on one of these earlier, but the dual use of devices for both personal use and work use presents a real challenge in terms of where the data is stored, how it's used, and what responsibility the organization has to actually manage the device and to what level they're able to manage the device. So, for example, many organizations don't want to watch URLs or websites that you go to when you're using the device for personal use, right?
Right.
That presents, in fact, a liability and
Sure.
possible legal issue
Yeah, I think
from a
we're
privacy
probably going to
standpoint.
bump into a few legal issues before we get through all this.
Right, so there's a big legal problem here in terms of responsibility and the right to monitor devices. The second big problem is the fragmentation of devices and how quickly they're evolving from an operating system standpoint. So Android today owns 60% of the market from an operating system standpoint on smartphones, but that keeps changing. On the enterprise side, we see Apple iOS used more frequently, and those platforms and operating systems are changing so quickly that it's very hard for
Right.
industry and government to keep up to both manage those devices and secure them. And that's a big challenge.
Yeah, I think they're out there. The complexity of just keeping track of all this stuff. We're down. We got about 11 minutes left to go in the show, and as we always do, we like to sort of like start looking ahead. We've talked about today, but let's try to look out to the future a little bit and share a vision for, what are some of the improvements we think will come and some of the big benefits will accrue to the American people and to government over time as we move to these mobile platforms. And let's get everyone's point of view on this. Dave, what's your crystal ball look like? David Smith over at Citrix, what's it look like in terms of where this is all going?
So I think BYOD does come down and becomes more and more of a reality, and I think there are a few reasons why. One is there is a cost element to BYOD. We've seen in many commercial organizations BYOD projects take off, and what happens typically in those projects is that a user is given the authorization and maybe some money to go buy a device. But when they buy that device, they also need to buy the support for that device. So if I need to get support for the actual device itself, I go to, the person I bought it from, so whether it's an Apple device or a Motorola or Samsung or whatever the device is. And IT looks at it more as, okay, I have a service I provide to that device, and I look at delivering applications and data to that device. What comes out of that, and I think what's the benefit is that if I think about the way I handle my personal device versus some device I've been given from a company, I have a tendency to prect that device maybe a little bit more. I value that device a lot more than something somebody else gave me.
It's like owning a car or leasing a car, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, very good. Well put. Chris O'Connell, what do you think? What's your 1-minute version of what it looks like in the future?
Well, I think two things come to mind. One is we start seeing a tighter link between outside the agency and the work that's being performed within the agency. I think the mobile device will become that window to the enterprise, window to people, to collaboration, to the data, to the actual business processes that are being performed as part of this interaction.
Right.
I think that's vitally important from a customer service perspective and from an efficiencies perspective. And I think the one advent that has really come about with mobile devices is the use of social. And it's another key area that you hear a lot about, social technology. Well, mobile enables that because of its simplicity, because of its lack of training. But what hasn't been married yet with social is the work, the mission.
Right.
And I think that's where we're going, where now we're at a time where you can link the two, how you are working and access to all those components within a social arena within organizations in order to deliver services and to make better decisions.
Wow, well put. I like that. It's good, some good thoughts there. Dr. Carter, Jennifer, what do you see in your 1-minute version or crystal ball of where this is all going?
We're working towards a joint environment where the users can securely connect with any device, anytime, anywhere to be productive. And we're looking forward to having a common infrastructure, the security standards and processes in place that are agile, the framework for management of applications to be able to allow the benefits that we talked about, collaboration, information sharing, the response times. And if you look at that future, mobility isn't an add-on or a think about how we could figure out how to use it. It becomes part of our everyday business and part of what the people have in the tactical environment to help with their operations. And so it becomes an embedded part of every day. So rather than going to the office and feeling like we're tied there, we're bringing that productivity and that information with us into the forward field and into the tactical environment.
That's a great way to look at it. Mobility won't be seen as something else. It'll just be part of it, day-to-day business processes. Oliver Friedrichs over at Sourcefire, what's your 1-minute version of the future look like as you look out as to where this is all going?
Well, I want to touch again on the security factor. So I think, we're still at the beginning of a bell curve from a security standpoint. I think problems will get a little bit worse before they get better. Mobile provides a ripe area for attackers to target. It's a huge captive user base, programmable platform that allows anyone to write applications and threats for the platform like we saw on the PC. Easy distribution through app stores allows threats to propagate, and a monetization system because billing is tied right into your phone these days, right through the app store. So it provides a fairly good environment for threats and attackers to target.
Right.
But I certainly think that we will overcome it. We'll get better at protecting devices, and we'll be able to take full advantage of the mobile workforce and see it fulfill all the promises that we expect.
Terrific. Yeah, we have a cybersecurity show coming up next month, and we always talk in that show is, will there be a digital Pearl Harbor kind of event before we actually solve the problem, or will we get in front of the problem and prevent it from happening? And it's always an interesting debate. Adina, Pantella, CBP, what do you see as the future in terms of some of the things that are going to come out of the mobility strategies?
Okay. Well, when we first deployed our mobile applications, the only platform that we could really work with was the BlackBerry platform, because those were the only phones that were authorized for use by CBP users.
Okay.
Now CBP is starting to explore other platforms such as iOS and Android. And as Tommy mentioned before, our applications are platform independent. So if we can get that device to connect securely to our CBP network, then we can deploy to it. We recently launched a Mobility Center for Excellence, which is
good.
made up of various areas within the Office of Information and Technology, and their charter is to lay out the strategy for mobility at CBP. They will also be responsible for managing and governance of the mobile devices. And also helping us is our process for adding these devices to our technical reference model. And we have a streamlined process for emerging technologies that helps us make new mobile devices available on the TRM in a more expedited fashion. And all of that will help us keep pace with the ever-evolving mobile market advances.
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, I know that idea of trying to standardize on a product, sort of like a non-winner. I have this theory that to get consensus, if there's more than one person in the conversation, you're not going to get consensus, especially when you argue Android versus iPhone versus BlackBerry versus, it's just not worth having the argument. Just find a way to support them all. Tommy, what do you think? What's your crystal ball look like? Where's this all look for you in the future?
Jim, I think we're just beginning to touch the tip of the iceberg.
I think so too.
Mobility is, like I said before, it's a game changer for Customs and Border Protection. A couple of years ago, we tried an idea at the Port of Miami, and the idea did a real spin, crash, and burn. Sorry, Frank. Why? The technology really wasn't ready for our idea. Now that the technology is starting to catch up with our ideas, we're delivering data to CBP personnel where they need it. Sometimes they need it at an airport boarding gate in London or maybe at JFK. Sometimes they need the data at an outbound lane at the land border in Detroit, Michigan. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they need it at a Border Patrol checkpoint on the interstate or at a bus terminal in Laredo, Texas. And sometimes they need it off the coast of Key Largo, 8 miles offshore.
Sure.
These locations don't always have an Ethernet cable.
Right.
They don't always have a T1 circuit, and they don't always have electricity. Mm-hmm. But what we're figuring out is how to give the data to our users where they need it and when they need it.
Yep. Very good. Well said. Frank, what do you think at the Air Force? What's your crystal ball look like? Where's this all going down the road?
Well, we always want to be device agnostic because we want to be able to update devices as will. So we want to be able to have devices that support the mission, the capabilities in that device. So we're looking at some way of ensuring that no matter what device is out there and it's provisioned correctly, we have a secure device, multi-level security at times is necessary based on mission to do the job that has to be done. So it's a matter of information dominance across the field. And we talk about tactical, and Tommy talked about it too. We have the same environment that Tommy has, maybe a little worse because there is some places where there is nothing.
Right.
And so we have to have that provision, and that's why we use tactical data links and satellites and aircraft. And so it's a much more complex wireless environment, if you will,
Right. Absolutely.
on the battlefield that we have to contend with to supply mobile devices to, so that the airmen and the soldiers and the Marines that we do support can have the information they need when they need it.
Yeah, some good challenges there. But you're one there about multiple level security. I mean, bringing up classified issues on mobile devices will be a whole other set of issues we'll talk about at our next show on mobile, or get into that. But well, this was great. Let me try to just do a couple of concluding remarks here. We start off talking about in the future we're going to be working anywhere. everywhere. No one's, for example, I don't know where I work right now. I work wherever I am, I guess, and I don't know what my hours are. I don't know any, just kind of like whenever something needs to be done, we do it. And I think mobility is going to change that whole concept of the workplace. We heard about getting any information, anytime, anywhere, but I also heard the right information at the right time to the right person, which I think is a better way to put it. It's not about information overload and just getting any information, it's getting the right information. And there's some challenges there about how to do that. And clearly we all see the fact that the world's approaching a time where decision-making is going to be made with time equals zero. There's no time often. Terrorist threats sometimes happen like that, and issues happen quickly. So decision-making is going to have to be done sort of in real time, and clearly mobile devices are going to be some of the benefits there. We talked benefits. I heard timely over and over again. I heard easier access to information. And I heard some things that bring it all home. Better benefits for the American people, better law enforcement, and so forth. So things are happening. Challenges, we know security is the big one. We know that's the big one, but we also know that industry who's working on security knows it's a big challenge. So it's kind of like there's a lot of research going on and efforts to get to the market to solve these problems because they're well recognized as what needs to be done. I like the fact that we talked about in the past, the exception will soon become the norm. And the fact that mobility won't be talked about as something different. It'll just be a standard business process. And as the kids move into the workplace, it'll just be another way of doing business. It'll change the work environment. So concluding about mobility, it's happening fast, and I think it's going to be really cool, some of the stuff that we see coming out of it. I'm excited for all this stuff. Let me thank a few folks. First of all, the panelists, from taking time from your day to come to share your knowledge. I kind of view these things as knowledge sharing. You help keep me smart. I do these shows every month, and I learn something new every time. So thank you for taking time from your very busy schedules to come here and tell your stories. Thank